I remember this one time I was 13 years old and he had said something and I said something back to him. I said, well, you're like that too. Then in the middle of the restaurant in front of everybody, he just lifted his hand, smacked me across the face. So today I'm going to share with you a secret, something I've never shared with anybody before. A lot of people look at me today and they're like, Eric, how are you so zenned out? Always so peaceful, always so happy, always so positive. And it's interesting because for the past 3, 4, 5 years, while there's been a lot of students following me all around the world, they've been learning about success. They've been learning about how to make money. They've been learning how to grow businesses. And a lot of people try to make money by being totally zenned out. And the secret I want to share with you today, and I want to do something a little bit different. We want to call this story time, where I share with you a story of how actually my initial success, when you talk about wealth creation or when I started creating that financial freedom, it didn't actually come from being zenned out or totally aligned. In actual fact, there was a lot of chaos and there was a lot of ego. So this story is about how I used ego to make a lot of money and what my thoughts are on it today. And maybe how you can learn a thing or two about ego and where you are in life. Even if you're an angry person, a stressed out person, a frustrated person, then maybe there's something for you to take from this story. But before we get into the story, show reel. Hit it.
People have today isn't that they're struggling, isn't that they can't get out of their shit. It's because the shit that they're in isn't big enough. And why I say that is because if that shit was big enough right now, if the people had a gun pointed to their head, they would actually get their ass moving. Always understand that emotions is what leads to motion. It's energy in motion. So if your emotional drive is not strong enough, you're not going to do anything to get out of it.
What's up guys, it's Eric here, international speaker, entrepreneur and best-selling author. And in this video, we're going to go story time today. I'm going to share with you a very private story of mine. And I just want to start off by setting a bit of context. Today, it's true. I never get angry, I never get frustrated, I never get pissed off, I never even really get impatient. Like, you'll never really see that from me. And nobody around me ever sees that anymore. And so a lot of people think that isn't really possible. There must be those down times and everything. But actually it's because I've did a lot of inner work over the past few years in terms of this alignment and meditation and this whole yogic experience. But the truth of the matter is, and I want you guys all to know this, is that I'm no Superman. They say every master was once a disaster. My dad was a gang leader. And so through growing up, I used to see Dad take charge. He was the alpha male, and Dad was always my idol. So through growing up, I used to think, you know, wow, Dad's so cool. He has so many people following him everywhere we go, and everyone looks up to him. Everyone says, hey, big boss, you know. And I always wanted to be like Dad. And nobody would ever dare argue with Dad, because the moment somebody would, let's say, confront him, or even if they didn't confront him, my dad would pretty much confront the other person first. And so he would pretty much take charge of everything. I remember one time at school when somebody, because, you know, whether we like it or not, in the UK, I grew up in the UK, and there is still some sort of bullying going on, you know, there is just still a little bit of racism going on. And I remember going home and I remember singing this exact song to Mum and Dad. I went back home and I sang, Chinese, Japanese, don't forget to wash your knees. And then Mum was in shock, Dad was going crazy saying, who taught you this thing? They're being racist, they're bullying you. Then he got really frustrated, and there's all this stuff started kicking off. And this is how my upbringing was. So I used to always feel safe. I used to always feel that, you know, Dad's just so strong and he's so masculine. And so through growing up, I started to adapt. I started to learn. My dad used to always say to me, he used to say, Eric, don't let other people be better than you. You need to make more money than people. You need to drive better cars than people. And when he used to drive better cars than other people, he used to say, look at their car, look at this, look at that. So it would make me understand at that point, or what my perception was of believing that, hey, success is all about money. Success is all about fame. Success is all about creating a real strong business, having a real big house and a really nice car. So that was my upbringing. And while going down this journey, and I want to share this with you, is because I think some of you may be going through some journey right now. You may be, I don't know, a little bit frustrated in life, or you may have anger or frustration over whatever thing that's happening right now. Or maybe you feel that you were, brought up in a less fortunate background, and you really want to attract a life that you desire, but you don't know how to actually break through. Now, what I want to share with you is this, and those of you who are used to my videos, I want you to type this in the comments box below, because you can get a huge learning and you can reaffirm this learning. There is a time for everything. There is a time for everything. What does that mean? It means that just because you are not like me right now, so zenned out, it doesn't mean that you can't be successful. Everybody has their part of the journey, and every disastrous moment, every ego moment, every fighting moment and stressful moment is actually all part of that journey of becoming the bigger you. When you are able to actually make those big mistakes, then you actually allow yourself to overcome them and overcome those challenges and learn from those mistakes. Then those challenges actually become your blessings. Everything is there for a reason. And now I look back, actually, I wouldn't be sitting here speaking to you right now on this video, talking anything about the law of attraction or success, had I not made all of these big mistakes I made along the way. I got into a very, very, very alpha male type of personality. So much so, a big boss gang leader, my dad. When I got into the teenage years, the moment I got to around 12, 13, I was rebelling. And so I would shout back whenever he said that I'm not good enough, or I'm not studying hard, or I'm lazy. I would shout back, and I would shout so much, sometimes even get so physical into a physical fight. Now, when you get into physical fight with your dad, it kind of gets quite messy. And so at that point, he would really, like literally, and I remember this moment, we were inside a restaurant. By the way, I just want to tell you this. With all of this context, I really love my dad dearly, and we always hang out. He's like Buddha now, like he's the calmest person you could ever meet, but I'll share with you how he went through that transition in a second. So in the middle of a restaurant, I remember this one time, I was 13 years old, and he had said something, and I said something back to him. I said, well, you're like that too. Then in the middle of the restaurant, in front of everybody, he just lifted his hand, smacked me across the face, and I just walked out. I just thought that was the most humiliating thing ever, because the whole restaurant stood still and looked over, and I just didn't know what to do. I just walked out. And this whole journey actually continued like this over to when I was 17 and 18. So much so, I remember sitting in the car one day, and I used to get into a lot of fights at school because I used to hate when people look at me a certain way, and I used to get really frustrated, and I used to think, why are you looking at me like that? Are you being racist? Are you being this? Are you being that? And I used to start fights all the time. So parents would always be called into school. And so through all of that, I remember in my teenage years, what actually happened was me and my dad, we were in a car one day, and this was actually a very big defining moment. This was the moment where I took the big boss down, okay? And I'll tell you how I took him down, because it was a very interesting way. What actually happened was, and this is interesting because my dad actually became very, very peaced out and blissed out and in this peaceful state and dropped all this ego stuff way before I did. And I'll explain why in a moment. So we were in the middle of a conversation in the car, then it all started kicking off. And the moment he started, I started, and he said, why are you drinking all the time? Why are you going out all the time, partying all the time, not doing anything with your life? Why are you not making money? Then I looked at him, then I started shouting back, and then just shouting a lot of abuse back. Then he started shouting at me, getting louder and louder. It used to be a bit like it was a bit like a volume competition, you know? So, and then he would raise his voice even louder, and he'll be really, really angry, and I could feel it again that he's just about to slap me across the face. And then I got really angry, and then he says, where did you even get this type of temper from? Where did you learn this from? How can you be like this? How can you be fighting like this all the time? And he looked deep into my eyes, and I remember looking deep into his eyes in that moment, and I said, I got all of this, and I learned all of this from you, Dad. That was the crucial moment. I remember in that moment, Dad stopped. And when he stopped, he looked at me. He went silent. And I've never witnessed Dad go silent in an argument before. Something must have sunk in that moment. And I always say, and by the way, those of you who use my videos, again, type this below for your second learning here. Life is purely a reflection of ourselves. Whatever we put out there, we always get back. This is a very interesting moment for Dad, because after I said that, he went silent. He didn't say anything else. And afterwards, we actually didn't speak for a long time. So it was around half a year to a year or something. And it was a very interesting thing, because the only time when we spoke again, and the only reason it actually happened back then, around 6 to 8 months later, I received a phone call from Mum. And Mum was crying on the phone, and she said to me, she said, Eric, your dad's in hospital right now. He's been really badly beaten. And she was crying and crying and crying. She said, go and see him now. And I got really furious. So I went to the hospital, and I remember seeing Dad really badly beaten. He got in some fight with some other gangs. And when I seen that, you know, I was just thinking, there's a part of me which was like, this is my dad. And no matter how I feel about him, how I feel about his anger, his frustration, whatever, he's my dad and I love him dearly. And something shifted there. But the biggest shift at that point was actually not for me, because my ego carried on, and I carried on getting into fights, and I carried on this anger and frustration. But what I realized was that Dad had dropped all the ego, Dad had dropped all of the frustration, and he went into peace, and he started chanting this Buddhist stuff every single day, and he started teaching me how to chant this stuff. And I was thinking, why are you wasting my time? And then Dad would, and it was very interesting, because I remember our next trip when we went out to China, we were in a restaurant, and I think the waitress was being very slow with dishes and stuff. Then I started shouting across the room. I said, why is it so slow? This is ridiculous. Then my dad said to me, he looked over to me and he said, Eric, you don't need to be so angry. She's just doing her job. When he said that to me, I was like, what is this? You know, this isn't Dad. What's going on? Anyway, that is the story of how my big boss dad, of a gangster dad, I kind of took over his alpha male and actually started feeding my own ego, and I became a stronger version of myself. And I fueled that ego, and that ego was actually something leading on, was the beginning part of how I actually used it towards making money and going into business at the age of 21, and actually creating multiple streams of passive income and driving my first Aston Martin by 24. If you guys actually want to know the rest of the story, I think that's for next time. Why? Because I think we've hit about 13, 14 minutes on the clock here. So guys, if you enjoyed this video at all, if this storytelling maybe, because sometimes I think when you know the background of other people and other people's stories, sometimes we can get some lessons from it. And if it's been of any lesson to you at all, please do hit the thumbs up. Comment below if you want to actually know the follow-up of the story. How did I actually take ego to actually make money and create that you know, that dream goal that a lot of people have, you know? or maybe some of you want to know the next part of the story, which is how then I dropped the ego and became the most peaceful person in the world. And so if you want to know the next part, just comment below, let us know. And if you do, then maybe I'll do another story time, maybe next week. But anyway, guys, again, those of you who are new to this channel, remember, hit that subscribe button and the notifications button next to it, because now I'm dedicated to making daily videos with law of attraction, spirituality, positive thinking, mentality, mindset, success, business, even Facebook marketing if you wish, anything positive to keep you inspired to make 2018 your best year yet. But for now, guys, I need to sleep. Ciao.